Hey guys, Solomon here. Hope you are having a great day. Today we are continuing Hippo Week by covering a game from none other than Gothamchess at Levy. And in all honesty, I feel a little bad for making this video, only because Levy is such a great player and such a great content creator, biggest YouTube chess channel in the world. And all that being said, this game wasn't his best, right? It wasn't his best game. But I thought I'd include it because I think it is helpful for us Hippo players, not just to see what we should do in the Hippo, but also what to avoid, right? And if you do play the Hippo, you really got to know what you're doing. You got to know the concepts and strategies. And if you know what you're doing, you're going to be more than okay. But you definitely got to study those outlining themes. If you're interested in growing in your skills as a Hippo player, I just dropped my first ever online course, nearly 6 hours on Hippo content. And I'll leave a link to it in the description below if you're interested. But okay, at this point, you know, Levy here going up against Grandmaster Akshat Chandra. This is in the 2021 National Open Round 8. And here White starts things off with Knight f3. And in all honesty, I mean, Gotham he wasn't even planning to go into a Hippo, right? If you watch this video kind of going over the game, he starts out the modern, then he plays e6. He's thinking about d5 here, but the game kind of unfolds, and then he finds himself playing d6, and all of a sudden he's playing into a Hippo setup, right? So, you know, move 10 just finishes. We're in the full Hippo now. 6 pawns on the 6th rank, 4 minor pieces on the 7th. And here White plays a4. White playing very well here, not pushing like crazy with e5 or d5, allowing us to potentially lock things up and just gain leverage on one side of the board or the other, something that we talk about quite a bit in my course, but instead just making some space, right? Now here we have queen b8. I think this is the first questionable move, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I think better here is just castling kingside, right? Castling kingside and then using a flank pawn, putting pressure on d4. d4 has less defenders, only 2, right? Than the pawn on e4. The pawn on e4 has 3 at the moment. And yeah, I think, you know, c5, putting pressure on d4, looking at knight c6 ideas, adding more pressure there. Not a great idea here for White to give up a central pawn for a flank. And if you play bishop f4, I'm kind of a fan of e5. You don't see this a ton in the Hippo, but it is kind of a nice idea, kind of a Stonewall-esque setup here. And okay, we take back, we tuck the queen. You know, we're starting to look at knight f6 and knight g4, attacking the bishop on e3. Black has a playable position here, right? But after a4, we see queen b8. And this is, you know, this is also something that I cover in my course. It's not a bad idea in and of itself, right? To play queen b8, queen a7, and then get this queen on a8, really, you know, forming a battery ram on this diagonal. But in this case, I'm not a fan of it simply due to the fact that, I mean, you know, let's say White plays h4, which they do in the game, and we play queen a7. White here has open access to this diagonal if they just drop this bishop here and play d5. So what White should do here, if they see a queen, is play a5 and bishop e3. Looking to play d5 now, attacking our queen on a7, and also looking to capture on e6, damaging our overall structure. The second reason that I really don't like queen b8 too much is because the whole goal is to get it to a8, but in this case, guys, e4 is rock solid. I mean, you know, queen e2, White is putting so much defense on that pawn. I'm just not sure that the queen 9 a8 in that kind of situation is super powerful and really adding that much more thrust into the game, right? So again, I'd say going back, you know, instead of queen b8, I would probably recommend here for Levy, you know, castling kingside, c5, knight c6, and just try to pile up some pressure on that d4 pawn, right? Play it slow, play it cool, but pile up some pressure, maybe d5 at the right moment, and Black should be okay there. But we have queen b8, and then h4, and it's actually good that Levy didn't play queen a7, right? Because again, a5, bishop e3, and that queen is just becoming a big target. Instead, though, we see the move of e5, which again, I'm not a big fan of. There are times where you should play e5 or d5 out of the 4 middle game attacking plans in the Hippo, which is also something I cover in my course. I think that Black pushing one of their central pawns is probably the least common and best option in most cases. Sometimes it is okay, but usually you want to do it if this pawn on d4 is a weakness. Right now, it is defended by 2 pieces instead of 3, but we're really not threatening anything here, right? And White's the one in control of the central position now, right? It's up to White if they want to take, or if they want to stay, or if they want to push. Whereas if we keep our pawn back on e6, if they play d5, we're the ones in the driver's seat. Do we want to take? Do we want to push? But now when we play e5, guys, we can't move this pawn back, right? Pawns don't move backwards. So now it's really up to White. I mean, how long do they want to keep their pawn there, right? We don't want to take on d4 in the Hippo, because in this case, we're going to have 2 central pawns against 1, and we're breaking up in the position. The Hippo player wants to close things down, so we should wait for the opponent to come attack us, at least in the center of the board most of the time, opposed to pushing ourselves with a move like e5. But okay, here white just plays bishop e3, and we have c6. And, okay, now queen c7. So here, you know, a little bit of wasting time. c6, a little bit questionable in the Hippo. In all honesty, I think, you know, if you really look at the 4 middle game ideas, you're trying to play b5 or g5, expanding on one side of the board or the other, or putting pressure on the central pawns with a flank move, or with you using one of your knights, right? But I'm just not so sure that this is really the way to go. In the Hippo setup. Here white plays h5, you know, continuing to advance on the king side of the board. g5 here was avoided by Levy, which was a good idea because of knight f5. I mean, usually g5 is great, but in this case, I mean, we're talking, you know, a top GM level player. You know, white here has got both their knights on b1 and g1 over to both of these squares. And yeah, I mean, both these knights are very involved on the king side. So here we just see the move of c5 continuing to expand, castling king side. And here after a5, the computer move is just taking on a5 here, right? Take on a5. And then, you know, from that point, start to put a little bit more attention on the king side of the board. But instead here we see the move of b5, and white just continuing to break things open with c4, right? We have f5, 2 captures on b5, white takes here. And it turns out, if you go over the game, over the analysis that Levy kind of shows on his channel, by the way, it's a great series. You know, Levy kind of talking through his Vegas tournament. Overall, he went 5.5 out of 9, so he had a great tournament. His only 3 losses were to Grandmaster players, and he said this is the worst game of the entire tournament, so he really did show off some great chess there. But that being said, in this position, he was planning for b takes, in which case he was going to play f4 and g5, right? Expanding on the king side. We're down a pawn, but we're attacking both of these guys pretty well, and white can't defend both, right? You can take on b5, but okay, we'll take one of the pawns off. We have g4 ideas in the air, continuing to hurl pawns down the king side. h5 is becoming a little bit disconnected from the white camp overall, and this is great for black. However, you know, instead of going into that line, which gives probably white an advantage, white still has an advantage there, but not crushing, white plays rook e1. And this knight's just done. It's just done. Can't move, right? Because we lose our queen. So, okay, we have f4. White snatches that knight off. And from this point, I mean, black kind of runs around. Rook takes, rook b6. And here Gotham plays, you know, a couple more moves, but resigns the position here. And that was game, right? So, all that being said, going back, in a position like this, right, you don't want to put a queen on a7 if white has open access to that square, right? Now, if this pawn can't push, or if the dark squared bishop isn't in the game, if it's been traded off, something like that, that's a great idea. But in this particular case, I think queen b8 was definitely a little bit of a mistake, because white could pretty easily just make that queen a target. And on top of that, he wasn't able to get his queen to a8 in the game, so this wasted a little bit of time. I also believe that e5 after h4 was definitely a little bit of an error there, because white here just kind of sits there, right? White's like, okay, well, thank you for giving me the option to take whenever I want. You're not going to take me. I can take you whenever I want. So there, white was the one that really benefited from the tension. All that being said, let me know what you thought of this video down below. Big shout out to Levy and what he's doing on YouTube. Just thought I'd show this game to kind of highlight some of the things to avoid in the Hippo. You don't want to be in a rush in the Hippo, right? When you get that full Hippo setup, you don't want to feel like you gotta do something crazy. Play cool, play collected. Again, I think going back, black would have been smart, instead of queen b8 to just castle kingside, c5, knight c6, pile up some pressure. I think black has a playable game there, right? All that said, thanks for watching today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow as we continue Hippo Week. Hey guys, wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of February in 2023. Appreciate you guys a ton. And if you haven't checked out the Patreon before, make sure to go check it out. There's a lot of Patreon exclusive benefits that you can gain, and I'd love to have you join the crew.